If you haven't yet gotten serious about discipleship, you haven't gotten serious about God yet. And I'm not trying to be offensive. I'm just trying to give you some indicator. If you're not serious yet about discipleship, like if you don't have a discipleship plan, you are just at an introductory phase in your walk with God. And so consider this like, your invitation. I'm inviting you, come join me on this lifelong route where we figure out what discipleship looks like and we actually invest into it. Discipleship is this thing that we need to spend a lot of time about. You don't need to have a 30-minute, presentation with slides, but if I were to sit down with you and say, we've got coffee, and hey, tell me what discipleship looks like in your life, how you're being discipled and how you're discipling other people. And if in 5 minutes you can't share in general what that looks like, there is something missing. Discipleship's a lifelong pursuit. It's a lifestyle change. It's not a lifestyle that I created or thought up. It's one that Jesus laid out. And I think that there's two struggles that we have that hold us back from discipleship. Number one, not seeing the significance of it. There's many commissions that God gives, but only one that the Bible refers to as great. In Matthew 28, Jesus came to them. He said, "All authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you, and surely I will be with you always to the very end of the age." So followers of Jesus are not only to be disciples, but we are to make disciples of all the nations. This wasn't a medium-sized commission. It was great. It was encompassing of all believers. It is everlasting until Jesus comes back and this new age is started. We've been commissioned by Jesus. We've been empowered by the Holy Spirit, and we've been given the promise of the presence of God to be with us. I think the second thing that oftentimes holds us back from discipleship is we just don't have a burden for it. There's two burdens. There's this burden that God takes, which is the burden of the world, and then there's this burden that God gives. The burden that God takes away is this burden of anxiety, this burden of fear of missing out, or fear of worst possible situations happening, or fear that your spouse will leave you, or that your kids won't like you, or you won't live up to your dad's standard, or you won't be successful or make a name for yourself. And that's all the burdens of the world that Jesus comes along and he literally lifts that burden up and he takes it off of you. But then there's this other burden, the burden of heaven, that he takes and he puts on you and says, I want you to accomplish this here on earth. How many of you have responded to this commission? If you were to honestly just say, how am I being discipled and who am I discipling? What other people would say 10 years from now, you know what? That person was so influential in my life. I knew what they were doing. They had an intentionality about them. They wanted them and their home and their life to be used for discipleship. They invested in me. They prayed for me. They reached out to me. Or will 10 more years go by and no more people will be able to say that because you have not stepped into discipling other people. And parents, I don't want you to include your kids in this. Not because you don't or shouldn't disciple your kids, but if God's plan was to accomplish his commission solely or primarily through the nuclear family, I think he would have said something like, make disciples of your family, not disciples of all nations. And so every time in the Bible, when I hear and see verses and it's talking about serving and discipleship, that's in addition to whatever you do for your family, not in replacement of. So what does God have to say about this? Any big issue? We should dive into his word and figure out what he has to say. We've established it's a great commission and that it's an all-inclusive commission. It's not for some believers, it's for all believers. Another hang-up for many of us is we skipped a really important step that Jesus told us to do. We never counted the cost. So over here, you'll see my contraption here. We can refer to it as the scale of salvation. Thankfully, Jesus gave us a head start. He did what we couldn't do to get us started. He gave us the gift of salvation. It's a free gift. It says so in Ephesians 2. It says, for it is by grace you've been saved through faith. And this not from yourselves. It is the gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast. It is a free gift. Can't be obtained or purchased or earned through any other method, but by the grace given to us. It is unattainable by yourself. And so this bucket right here, I want you to consider this the bucket of salvation. And when you put this on the scale, it weighs down. And there is nothing that can be done to ever balance this scale. But it doesn't mean that there's not something that is supposed to go on this end of the scale. When you got saved, there was strings attached. And you're like, well, that doesn't make sense. Then it's not free. Sure it is. If I were to offer you a $10 million mansion, say it's yours, it's free. You're like, I never could have afforded this myself. And I say, but there's just one thing. When you take possession of this and this is now yours, I ask that you just pray in that $10 million mansion every day. And if you said yes to that, you wouldn't go around telling people, I purchased this mansion through my prayer. No, you would say, someone gave me this mansion. I never could have afforded it. The way I got it is this free gift that they gave me. But I stepped into agreement with this person. I stepped into a covenant with this person. And so they gave me this. And in response to that free gift, I agreed that I would pray inside that mansion. So it's a free gift. But there's still something that's supposed to go on this side. In Luke 14, you can turn there if you got your Bibles. Jesus gives us 3 illustrations in regards to counting the cost. First verse in 25, it kind of sets the stage. It says that large crowds were traveling with Jesus, and turning to them, he said. So oftentimes when Jesus would travel places, crowds would follow. And you had people following for the right reason, and you had people following for the wrong reason. And there was many times that people, they cared about what Jesus could offer them, not who Jesus was. They cared about what Jesus could offer them, not who he was. That was why they were following Jesus. Jesus didn't try to talk people into the kingdom. In fact, I think you could make a case that he often tried to talk them out of the kingdom. Really, what Jesus was doing is he was presenting mankind with a choice. He said, you can have truth, you can have forgiveness of sins, and then you bear your cross here on earth, but you get paradise in eternity. Or he says, you can have your truth. You can have pleasure apart from God here on earth, but eternal separation from him in hell. Like the people that don't want God here on earth, they're not going to want him in eternity either. I go back to this quote often, but C.S. Lewis puts it so well. He says, the damned are, in one sense, successful rebels to the end. The doors of hell are locked from the inside. So verse 26, if anyone comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even their own life, such a person cannot be my disciple. Quite the recruitment strategy, huh? I have to imagine that large group of following Jesus probably got a little bit smaller after that statement. Some people were probably hoping for a miracle, and Jesus makes this statement, and they're probably like, I'm done. This guy's wacko. Do you hear what he just said? Like, I'm not spending any more time, and they probably turned around and left. Jesus reveals here the first case that disqualifies you from being a disciple. Your love for him must come to surpass that of every other family member and even your love of self. So now we begin to get to this scale, this side of the scale. In the classic book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, Dale Carnegie writes, remember that a person's name is to that person the sweetest and most important sound in any language. And that might be true of humanity, the way we were born, but it's not supposed to be the way that we are when we're reborn. Because Jesus would say, that won't do. You need to be born again. He's saying you need a new life where your spirit is reborn and ignited, but there's this death that happens in the process too, where you die to yourself. So what do you want to hear more of? You want to hear people say your name, or do you want to hear people say his name? The world says follow your heart. Love yourself exactly as you are. The gospel says die to yourself and I'll make you new. Verse 27, whoever does not carry their cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. So Jesus reveals a second reason that disqualifies you from being his disciple. A refusal to pick up your cross. What's your cross? It's his commission that he started, that he invited you into, but then it's our effort, our sacrifice, our life, our thoughts, our actions. It's an all-encompassing, lifelong, never-ending pursuit of discipleship, becoming one and making disciples. And this isn't for the faint of heart, because it's exhausting, but it's beautiful. And you might be thinking, well, this is more extreme than I thought it was. It's as extreme as it gets. And these aren't my words. This is Jesus talking about this stuff. If you wanted comfortable, you should have gone to the library or a coffee shop this Sunday morning. But if you want something that's real, and you're willing to trade your comfort for that truth and that thing that's real, then you're in the right place. If deep down you've always felt like there was something in you that wanted to be great, and you've been trying all these other methods. Well, maybe if I have a successful business, people will view me as great. And maybe if I marry the right person, then I'll be great. Or if I got enough money, or if I'm the star athlete on the sports team. And you're looking for all these reasons to feel great so other people will affirm you. And Jesus comes along, he says, I've got an entirely different method. He said, from the start, you're already great in this sense because you are valuable to me. But then I want to show you that desire for greatness, there is a way to live it out. And it's complete opposite of what everything in the world says. You become a servant. You begin to disciple. You begin to die to yourself. And everyone on earth might not give you any applause, but me and all the angels in heaven, we're looking down and we're saying, that's one of my disciples. That's someone who understands it. That's someone that we will say at some point, well done, good and faithful servant. He invites us to join him in his great commission, in making his name great. So Jesus gets into his first illustration. Verse 28. Suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Won't you first sit down and estimate the cost to see if you have enough money to complete it? So Jesus, he poses this hypothetical question. He says, you wouldn't start building a house or a tower and just see what happens, would you? First, you should determine the size. What square footage do you want? Do you want to build up or do you want to build out? There's advantages of each. You determine the design, how you want it to look. What style are you going for? What feel do you want it on the inside? You consider the engineering, the architecture of it from the standpoint of stability and longevity. Is it structurally sound? Is it going to weather against storms? You create a timeline. How long is this going to take? What are the different stages of construction? Who's going to do the work? And most importantly, you consider the cost. And when considering the cost, you ask, can I afford it? No, you can't. But gratefully, he did something that already gave us that head start. He afforded it for us. The next question, is it worth it? And that's something that only you can answer. When I present the gospel to people, I used to try to convince them that it was true and that it was worth it. Because those are two things that I deeply believe and have based my entire life off of. But I approach it differently. Now, instead what I do is I present the gospel and I say, is this good news to you? I offer them a question. And if they say no, then there's nothing I can do to convince them. They don't want to step off their throne of self and elevate God there. They want to be God over their own lives. And God's given them the free will to be able to choose that. So there's nothing I can do. I can plead with them. I can try to show them evidence. I can say, hey, here's the before and after in my life, but I can't change a cold heart. Jesus is saying, if you aren't willing to see it through to the end, why even start? He says, for if you lay the foundation and are not able to finish it, everyone who sees it will ridicule you. If you start but you don't finish, you're going to look foolish. 18 years ago, California, they started this bullet train project to connect a bunch of the major cities. The voters, they passed a $9.95 billion bond issue on the promise of its completion by 2020. Today, they've spent somewhere between 15 and 25 billion, and not a single high-speed track has been laid. They call it the train to nowhere. I mean, you can see why. There's no start. There's no end. It's just this thing sitting up there. They started it, but they didn't count the cost. People will ridicule you. Now, you might see this, and you're like, hey, I'm used to this with government projects. And that's fine. But Do you really want the same thing to happen with the things that we endeavor to do for God and with God? Do you really want your coworkers and your neighbors and family members to be like, I remember when you started that whole God thing. It was kind of weird, to be honest, but I'm really glad it was just a phase. And for a little bit, I was wondering, like, are they really going to follow through? Are they really going to make family decisions based on this? Are they really going to make monetary decisions based on this? Like, are they really going to start doing that? But thank goodness it was just a phase. I wondered for a little bit, is that what you want it to be? Do you want your life to be the train to nowhere? You start a project, but you never finish it? I have to imagine, based on the strength of language that Jesus is using here, that he's also implying that it doesn't help our movement to have half-hearted disciples leaving partially built towers laying around. A reminder to the rest of the world. Verse 30, saying this person began to build and wasn't able to finish. Jesus says, why open yourself up for ridicule? Sit down, count the cost. Don't choose ignorance. I was just talking with a new friend here at church, and we were in our backyard, and we were just kind of talking about the uniqueness of the stage of life that we're in. He's a couple of stages further than I am. And he made the statement, he said, you know what I'm focused on? I just really want to finish well. I just really want to finish well. If you're running a marathon, it doesn't really matter how fast you ran the first mile or the 13th or the 20th if you don't finish. Like, can you imagine the conversation of you go and attempt to run a marathon and you're bragging, you're like, I ran the first mile in 5 minutes. And so that's amazing. I don't know how you did it that quick. What did you run the second mile in? I didn't make it to the second mile. Like, no one's going to be impressed. They're like, you obviously didn't count the cost. Like you forgot that you were running a marathon and you thought it was a 1 mile race. So Jesus gets into the second illustration in verse 31. He says, or suppose a king is about to go to war against another king. Won't he first sit down and consider whether he is able with 10,000 men to oppose the one who is coming against him with 20,000? Like, I don't think you'd be a wise king or a wise general if you didn't first strategize before going into battle. Like knowing who your opponent is, knowing what it is that they want, knowing what level they're going to go to find success, knowing the strength of their army, knowing the way, the style that they fight. Because when you sit down and you count the cost, it becomes clear whether you have a winning strategy or not. And when it comes to discipleship, it is the task and responsibility of every individual believer, not just an organization. Bethel's Rock Church cares about, invests in, and prioritizes discipleship. But even if we didn't, it doesn't mean that you're off the hook. It wasn't Bethel's Rock Church that declared, go and make disciples of all the nations. That was Jesus 2,000 years ago. And we're just re-echoing what he said. He says if he's not able, he will send a delegation while the other is still a long way off and will ask for terms of peace. He says you sit down, you count the cost, maybe you get into it, maybe you recognize you're not ready for war. Maybe you need a preparation in time of peace before your time to conquer. But even that time of peace and preparation, it's not static, it's active. You are building and getting ready for what you need to win. In the same way, those of you who do not give up everything you have cannot be my disciples. Some versions say if you're not willing to give up all of your possessions. So Jesus gives a third reason you cannot be his disciple, an unwillingness to give up everything. You see, you don't go into war without counting the cost, because if you lose, you could lose everything. When kings would go to battle, and the losing king, you could lose your title, you could lose your position, you could lose all of your wealth, you could lose your family. It was common practice of the victorious king to gouge out the eyes of the defeated king, so you could lose your eyesight. Like, there was a lot that went into this. And so you wouldn't just randomly go to war and see what happens. Jesus said to his disciples, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will find it. How big of a part do possessions play in your life? because it's prevented many people from entering the kingdom of God. Do not fall into the false thinking of, I don't love stuff that much. In fact, you should have some concern as to how much you love stuff. If God said, give away your car, would you? If God said, give away your house or your retirement account or your gun collection or your four-wheelers or your clothes, would you? It's easy to say, of course I would. Then I challenge you with this. Go and offer those things up in prayer and say, God, I haven't heard you speak anything to me, but if you're asking me to give up one of those things, I will. Begin praying that prayer. You'll realize how much that stuff has a hold of your heart. Have you counted the cost? When I became a Christian, I lost all my friends. I had been kind of like the party animal of the group. And so I would get inebriated and I would do stupid, entertaining stuff. Everybody else thought it was fun and entertaining, right? They're just like, Zach, go do this, and I'll just go do it. And then the irony is, I became a Christian, and I actually became a good friend. I started to care about my friends and their well-being. And I did things that I never did before. And very quickly, I think it really only took a couple of weeks, they got together and they had kind of some conversations, and they're like, we don't want to be your friend anymore. One of my best friends, he was kind of the spokesperson for the group, and he just said it bluntly. He said, we get it, you got into this God stuff, and you're different now, but we don't want to affiliate or be friends with that. And it was heartbreaking. And I remember going to God, and I'm like, God, like this is what's going on. And you know what God said to me? He said, Zach, you didn't think it was going to be easy, did you? And I was like, well, that wasn't very empathetic, God. And I told him, I said, no, I didn't think it was going to be easy. I just didn't think it was going to happen this quick. For those of you that are dating or you're looking for a spouse, especially ladies, ask where your man is going, like in their life. Ask what their life direction is. And if they don't have a direction, run. Like, just say, we're over, and run. And you go and find someone different. There are few things that are more dangerous in this world than a directionless man. It was either mine or Amy's first or second date. We have an argument as to whether the first date was official. I asked her out for breakfast. I paid for breakfast. We flirted, and she says it wasn't a date. But it was a date. But it was either after that one or maybe it was the second one. And we went to a park, and we were on a bench. And I told her, I said, Amy, I'm either going to be a pastor or a missionary. If you're not willing to go anywhere in the world with me, then we should just stay friends. And at this point, Amy didn't owe me any allegiance. Like, she was looking out. She had to count the cost of the kind of life that she wanted to live, and whether the structure that I had set up, whether she wanted to operate in that structure or not. And she was thinking, do I want to have kids? And if so, am I willing to have them in some other country? And finally, she got to the place where she just decided, I can live in the Sahara Desert. I just can't be away from Zach's sense of humor. And like, you know, I can live on the plains of Africa, but I can't do away with his dad jokes. I can't find those anywhere else. And so I think that was the thing that just won her over. There's a picture on the screen of when we went to Nigeria. What I was really looking for was a picture with not me in the middle. I wanted a picture with Beth Winslow in the middle, because she was on this trip, and she was pregnant on this trip. And so the cost that she was paying to go on this trip was quite high. But we were in Nigeria. Nigeria was very unsafe, so we had armed guards wherever we went. And but there was a funny kind of like God thing that happened before the trip. Right around this time, Amy and I, we added 2 kids to our family through adoption. So we bumped up to 4. Amy stepped back from work. I was now the breadwinner for the family, and we figured that it was prudent for us to take out a life insurance policy on me. In case I die, family's taken care of. And so I go through the application process, and the guy calls me back. He goes, yeah, you've been rejected. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm healthy, you know, I'm youngish, and like, you know, and I was like, well, why? And so he's looking through the application. He said, well, you said you're going to Nigeria on here because they ask you your travel plans for the next year. And I'm like, well, yeah, I wasn't going to lie. I was like, I'm on the way to, I'm going to go to a mission trip a couple months. So like, well, yeah, that's why. They're like, it's literally not worth their cost to insure you if you're going to go to places like that. And so again, brought up to God, which I do just about everything. I'm like, what's up with that? And God says, I guess you're going to have to trust me. And I picture him just like, tongue in cheek, but of course the trip went well. But these are those different instances where you really have to count the cost and you got to figure out how far you're willing to go. We get into the third illustration. Jesus says, salt is good, but if it loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? And when I think of salt, think of how many different uses. All right, I need someone with fingernails. You got to open my illustration. Thank you. I think of all the different uses that salt has. Like how many foods would just be trash, tasteless food without salt? Like imagine potato chips, but no salt. Like I wouldn't even want them. Like that's just potato. Who wants just potato? And salt is we use it in our agriculture, we use it in manufacturing. It makes our water soft. How many of you would like to drive in Minnesota winters with no salt? It's pretty helpful for what it does on our roads. We use it in health and beauty products, everything. I mean, just go for a week and say, I'm not going to use anything that has or uses salt in the process. And there are so many things that would change in our life. Now, salt is one of those things that's so unique. If I were to ask you to describe salt, I would love to hear your description, because I don't know how to describe it. It's salty. Like, it's such a fundamental thing. The description is the thing itself. And that's what Jesus is talking about here. He says, it's neither fit for the soil nor the manure pile. It's thrown out. Whoever has ears to hear, let him hear. And so what Jesus is saying is, if salt loses its taste, it's worthless. It's not even good enough for a round two of being made into manure and having a second life or a second use. He said it's worthless. Salt was such an important commodity and necessity of life. Roman soldiers, they were actually given an allowance for salt. It was called the salarium. Jesus is saying, let him who has ears hear. Jesus is saying, are you getting all of this? Are you understanding the illustrations? Are you understanding that as a believer and a disciple, you are to count the cost? So first, you count the cost. You determine what's needed. And it will bring you to this burning of the plow type moment. This is a famous reference to when the prophet Elijah went and recruited Elisha. And he found Elisha plowing the fields with oxen. And Elisha recruits him. And so Elisha, he does what? He cuts up the plow, uses it as firewood, and kills the oxen and offers it all up as a burnt sacrifice, signifying, I have nothing to come back to. There's only one direction, and it's forward. There's only one direction, and it's my commission. There's only one direction, and it's my call, the call that God has placed on my life. This old life is dead. It's done. And now it's just moving forward. What's needed for you to start prioritizing discipleship? What will you have to give up? You might think, oh, I'm just so busy, and I'd love to do these other things, and that kind of a statement is a value statement. What you're actually saying is, I value the stuff I spend time on now more, so the other stuff can't happen or will have to wait. And Jesus would look at you and say, you cannot be my disciple then. Perhaps you'll need to unencumber yourself or your kids from certain activities or commitments so you can actually prioritize discipleship. Amy and I were just having one of these moments yesterday or the day before. We were trying to plan out our fall calendar. And our fall is always the craziest season. And it's there's all this ministry stuff, and then there's all this other life stuff. And we want to do it all, and we can't. But we know when push comes to shove, whether it be finances or time or resources, we know which one's going to win out. We're going to prioritize discipleship. We're going to prioritize the things of God. Secondly, you participate. You ask yourself, how am I being discipled? And you never stop being discipled. Like you never think of it as this way, like you never graduate past needing a gym membership. You don't go to the gym and then you've been there for 2 years and you reach like God level fitness and you're like, I'm just so good I can just now cancel my membership. That doesn't happen, right? It's a lifestyle. It gets included, like you might get more fit, that might change based on the season, but you never move past the desire or hopefully the need for staying in good shape and taking care of your body. One of the best ways that discipleship happens is through life groups. Happens more naturally in circles than rows. Join a life group. Get involved in the lives of a group of people. Meet once a week in homes. Share wins, losses. Bring your kids. Let them play and fight with the other kids and reconcile. Let it be messy. That's what life is. Stop using your kids as an excuse to isolate. Open your Bibles together. Ask questions. Learn. Grow alongside other believers. Next, you create the opportunity for other people to participate. Maybe you've already participated in a life group, but you've been sensing that there's something more and that maybe you should really start a life group. Open up your home. Use your home for ministry. We're looking for 7 more life group leaders for our fall campaign here at Farmington. And you don't need 10 people for a successful life group. You just need 3. If you're married, just make your spouse attend. You're already halfway there. All you got to do is make one other person come. You don't even have to tell them it's a life group. Just trick them. Tell them you got food. They show up, and you just got a Bible open. You stick it in their hands. I'm telling you, it's pretty easy to start. We have our fall campaign starting September 13th. It's called Exodus. It's 8 weeks long. We try to make the fall campaign as easy as possible to get into, either as a leader or a participant. We do a training for leaders. We've got videos each week of content for the groups. We've got discussion guides created. We help promote your group. Can I be honest? Last year, someone was like, I feel like you're using this fall campaign to rope people into doing life groups all year round. I'm like, you're right. Like, this isn't a secret strategy. We're hoping that you join a life group and you get a taste of water and you didn't know how thirsty you were. And you never want to stop. That's our goal. That's our strategy. But if you recognize that this thing is significant, it's a great commission, we're all supposed to be a part of it, you got to start somewhere. So how would things look different if we all prioritized discipleship? Imagine if every block in Farmington, Lakeville, Rosemont, Apple Valley, Dundas, Northfield, Hampton, Elko, imagine if they all had a life group that people could go to. Worship team, you can make your way up here. A group that brought them life. A group that reshaped the fabric of our communities and brought God and neighborly interaction back to the center of it. Jesus gives another salt illustration. He had many of them. He says this, you are the salt of the earth. But if salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It's no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. Will you stand? Remember earlier when I said that this scale, it was never going to balance out, but there was supposed to be something that goes on this other side? This is where discipleship comes into play. You and I are called to be salt and light. And what I love about it is that this is the foundation of how we live. Like, this is what we stand on. It's this heavy weight. It's this thing that Christ did for us on the cross. But then what he did is he was no longer just this distant God. He actually came and dwelled inside of us. So we have God in us. And so his work on the cross actually then takes us and it elevates us up so everybody else can see it. You and I are supposed to be salt and light. We're not supposed to stay hidden in our families and have the nice Christian family where we're comfortable with each other, but we're always isolated inside our house. We're not supposed to even be the person where it's like, I'm going to do some good things here and there, but I'm never going to let other people see it. It's actually not biblical. There's times that God will tell you to give in secret, and your left hand shouldn't know what your right hand is doing. And then there's times where your deeds should be seen by all mankind, and God will use those deeds and those actions, and he will lift you up and elevate you so everybody can see them. And then as they see them, it gives you an opportunity to testify. And they might even go to you like they went to Paul and be like, man, you're amazing. And then you direct them. And you say, actually, I'm not, but God is. And the only reason I'm up here that you can see what I'm doing, the only reason I have the capability to do these things is because of what he did on the cross. And you become great at being seen for your good works and your good deeds, but you become even better at deflecting. And so when people try to praise you and lift you up, you just say, no. The only reason I'm up here is because he did this. The only reason you can see this is because of this. The only reason I could do this is I had to die to myself because old Zach never would have done that. But because of the work on the cross, now I'm able to do this. And we do this again and again and again and again, and it's a lifestyle. It's a lifestyle where you and I commit to discipleship. It's his commission. It's a great commission, and we're all supposed to be a part of it. And we're not supposed to be a part of it in a little way. We're supposed to be a part of it in a big way. And so my question for you is, how are you a part of it? Who's discipling you, and who are you discipling? And if not, then you got some changes to make.